Hi, welcome to another batch of classic bookmarks. A couple of years ago, we realized that we had been producing Bookmark for 30 years, some 425 episodes. To celebrate, we chose 15 shows to enhance and broadcast. The reception has been terrific. Viewers got a real kick out of seeing or re-seeing the conversations with Toni Morrison, Ray Bradbury, William Styron, Alexander McCall Smith, and many others. So, we have chosen another 15 shows from the archives. Interviews with George Saunders, Margaret Atwood, E.O. Wilson, Walter Mosley, Albert Murray, James Haskins, and 9 others. Of course, we are continuing to produce new shows with new writers and old writer friends. But in the meantime, we hope you enjoy watching these classics as much as we enjoyed making them. Alabama landed a big one when director Tim Burton decided to shoot Big Fish in Montgomery. But this story belongs in Alabama. Author Daniel Wallace grew up in Birmingham and Cullman. Many writers show that they are writing under the influence of mythology, but Wallace takes it a step further and sets out to create mythology. I spoke with Wallace at Writing Today, the annual conference for writers and readers at Birmingham Southern College. Daniel, thank you for coming in today.
That's great.
As often as you and I have spoken, we've never had the chance to sit down and talk in this format.
Right.
So some of the things that we have to talk about, we have talked about, but that's okay. Other people weren't listening.
Exactly.
Right.
Good point.
Your career, which has been in the last 3 years really remarkable. I mean, lots of attention, 3 books, the movie, the works. But it didn't. This is an overnight success that took 15 years.
That's how that's how long they take usually. I understand.
Right.
You know?
I had understood, and I don't find it so remarkable that you wrote a story and then published another story in good magazines, Prairie Schooner and Tri-Quarterly.
Right.
But I had no idea that you had written 5 unpublished novels. Tell me, how did you manage to persevere through that?
At least 5. I think it could be as many as 6, and because sometimes I forget. I've wrote so many that I forgot one. I always forget one. You know, there was a sense. It wasn't so much a sense of having to persevere, but I never went to MFA school. I never studied much writing because I couldn't endure the round table flagellations that you would have to endure from your other students who didn't know any more than you did about writing, but you always had to say something negative, otherwise people didn't think that you had read the story or that you were very smart. The worst thing that you could say is, "Oh, I love this." So I've avoided that, and I learned on my own. I bought a lot of books, and I started writing and writing and writing, and just churning the stuff out in an effort to figure out, you know, who I was as a writer, what I could do, and each novel I ended up doing something wrong, but just a new thing wrong every time.
And you sent them off to be evaluated?
After I finished a novel, I loved it. I mean, the weeks after a novel, after writing it, I was pretty high on it, and I would send it to an agent to see if they would sell it. And in fact, at least 2 of the, well, 3, but the 2 of the novels I sent to agents, and they said it was, this is actually the freshest, most original stuff I've read in a long time. I'm going to send it out to 10 and 12 different New York publishers, and we're just going to wait for the bidding war to start. And we waited, and we waited, and these rejections came back and back, and soon the agents wouldn't take my call anymore. It was like, well, I guess I was wrong about this one.
But one after the next. There's apparently no quit in you.
I like writing. I have as much fun writing the stuff that's published as the stuff that doesn't get published. It's just fun.
Right. Although you did avoid the negativity of workshop.
Yeah.
You did encounter the woman who is becoming a kind of southeastern saint of writing, our friend Lee Smith.
Oh, yeah.
You did study with her for a bit.
Well, her classes, of course, are completely different. I mean, she has such a beneficent and loving spirit that it's impossible to get that tone that some classes get sometimes, which is really dark. So I studied with her at UNC when she was still teaching there before she went to State and took over the writing department there. And that was a great class. That was great because it was a class that we called stylistics, and we would read a novel by, say, Faulkner, and then write a story in that style. And so you had carte blanche to write one sentence that was 3 pages long, which you don't often get. And then you would read Hemingway. So you would figure out what these writers are doing to achieve the effects that they get, and what over time that you learn, I think, writing, is that it's like when you laugh, it's not an accident that you're laughing, or when you cry, it's not an accident. They are doing this to you on purpose.
Oh, those manipulative writers.
I know.
When Big Fish came out, it got a wonderful reception, and we will talk about the filming, but
Right.
let's stay with the actual novel for a bit. The chapters are very short,
Yes.
and you tell a wonderful story about why they're so short.
Well, and it's a wonderful true story. When I was writing those 5 novels that I mentioned earlier, I was pretty footloose and fancy-free, had all the time in the world, and the novels reflected that. They were 300 or 400 pages long. Then I had a child, a son, Henry, who I had to take care of on a day-to-day basis, and really having a kid really cuts into your writing time. I had him in the basement where I had a little writing office where the ironing room used to be, I think, and the people that lived there before me, and he would be asleep in his car seat. And really, my writing time was limited to his nap time. And so however long he slept was how long my chapters would be, because I had to have the sense of doing something. Even though I wasn't able to write a lot, I wanted the sense of completion. So if I could get a chapter done a day, every 2 days, I'd feel like I was making progress. I discovered that chapters didn't have to be 20 pages long. They could just be 2 pages long. And that determined in part by his sleeping schedule.
Apparently, little Henry never slept for very long at a time.
No, not enough. Well, actually, he slept just, I think, providentially, I think he helped me discover what works, a style that works for me, because I don't have that excuse anymore, and I still write short. The chapters in my the newest book, The Watermelon King, they're very short as well. It works for me.
The first book, The Big Fish, and the latest book, especially The Watermelon King, and Ray in Reverse to a lesser degree, are, well, maybe not to a lesser degree. Your books are about fathers and death. Now, Ray in Reverse, since it takes place largely in heaven, it opens in heaven and closes in heaven, is really about death. It's really about what slightly after death. The other two are about fathers and deaths. This is an unusual conjunction. I mean, even for Sigmund Freud, this is an unusual conjunction. I mean, you've been addressed on this kind of subject before. Your book is about, the first book is about the dying father.
Right.
Last book is about dead father. Both of them are voyages of discovery. What's the connection in your mind as you're exploring fathers and death?
Well, I think that death is one of the most important things that happen to us, or that's going to happen to us. It's always been something that I've thought about all my life. Even when I had a dog, it got run over. My mother wrote me a note, said, "This is the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you." Turns out she was wrong. Lots of other deaths followed, and they keep happening. I have a tendency to write humorous scenes that are interlocked with some grisly subject matter, and I find that I am, not completely sure which comes first. I want to be amusing. I want to be entertaining. I want the person reading my books to laugh. But I want to also write something that's important or that's moving. You can't write about death straight, I don't think. It's impossible. It's very hard for a reader to for instance, in Big Fish, father is dying throughout the whole book, but it's a hilarious book. I don't think I could have presented it with a straight face, very sad death scene. You have to have some sugarcoating to swallow it. So what I've tried to do with the with my preoccupation with death is to make it palatable. The father issue, I don't know that I choose the nature of the stories that I write. I think they choose me, and I rarely get sort of out there with writing analogies, but I can't control what I'm passionately interested in, what I obsess over. You can ask my mother. She wonders why I never write a story about her. I could, I guess, but I'm not really interested in it for some reason. Fathers just motivate me. And clearly it has something to do with being a father and the father that I had, but it's just what really gets me going, and I have no control over it.
Do you think, try this as a kind of hypothesis, you and I are both sons, you and I are both fathers, so we have a vested interest in this subject. Mothers may be knowable. We as as boys may have felt we knew our mothers, and fathers are mysterious.
I think that's true. I think mothers open themselves up and try to be just pure love if they can, whereas fathers are much more challenging, ask something of you that a mother doesn't, and because they spend so much time away from the home, I think there's a mysteriousness, like where are they going, what are they doing, and in my father's case, it really was mysterious, and things have turned out since he's died several years ago, that I've learned that I went, wow, he was mysterious.
There was another life.
There was another life.
There, as in Big Fish.
There was another life out there. Children are in this very special place in regards to their parents. They're totally dependent on them for so long, for everything, for survival. And you start to believe that you're the reason for your parents. You're the center of their lives, and that's simply, you learn eventually that that's not the case. They're the center of their lives.
Your books are laced with mythology, and I would be willing to bet 50 cents that somewhere down the road there's an MA student in English who's going to get out the Golden Bough and the Watermelon King and write a thesis on mythological strands in the third novel of Daniel Wallace.
That would be hilarious.
Oh, but it's true. It may be ridiculous, but it's inevitable. Now, the question for you and for readers of your book is, if people want to know, at what level of consciousness do you work? Because it's very clear. You're an educated person.
Yeah.
You know a certain amount of Greek and Roman mythology.
Sure.
Or in the case of somebody like Joseph Campbell, sort of international mythological systems.
Yeah.
At what level of consciousness do you work to put it into the book or to guide the book by way of a previous myth or myth making?
It's different things happen in different cases. In Big Fish, there was a very conscious effort to take, especially Greek mythology, folk tales and then Greek mythology, and wrap it around this character that I'd created. I wanted my character to go through a lot of the same things that your model Greek mythic hero went through. For instance, a journey through hell. He had to have a journey through hell, and so they all do it. I did it. He had to have some labors, I felt. And so instead of, so I looked at Hercules. The Hercules had 12 labors. I only give mine 3. Hercules cleaned the Augean stables, and I have mine working at a vet cleaning the cages. And that's kind of humorous. That's a joke. But there are other myths which I read or had read at some point and unconsciously sort of subverted or changed around for my own book, which, like, there's a chapter in the book called The Old Lady and the Eye, and it's about a glass eye that gets stolen. The hero has to find it and bring it back to the old lady. You know, I didn't know at first where that came from, and then I discovered there is a myth of the 3 old ladies, I think they're fates, who share an eye. And Perseus, when he's looking for Medusa, they know where Medusa is, he doesn't. They won't tell him. He steals their eye as they're passing it back and forth, and he says, tell me where Medusa is, or I won't give you your eye back. And that's where that came from. But reading it, I think, in the book, you might not know that. I didn't really know that as I was writing it.
John Barth has used that very same myth in one of the novellas in the Dunyazadiad. It's in the Perseid, and he rewrote. He's a rewriter of myth, and he chose to rewrite that one. You're not a rewriter of myth. You're a reuser, recycler.
Myth recycler.
That glass eye, though, as long as you bring it up.
Yes.
And I was going to anyway. There's a glass eye in every book.
The glass eye in every book.
And the reader's supposed to find that. Well, they're not too hard to find, usually.
Right.
Watermelon King, it's a little obscure.
It's a little obscure, and if you find all 3, you can get a prize. It's just send it, you know.
Why is there?
What is your
fascination for glass eyes?
Well, no, I think most of the things that affect you as a writer happen to you in real life. It's not who have you read. For some reason, people think who you've read or the things that affect you most. I don't think it's true. When I was in 6th grade, I lived across the street from a guy named Frank who had a glass eye. And of course, at this point, I'd never seen one before, and they're fascinating. Glass eyes are fascinating. They're made to look exactly like real eyes, and yet you can tap on them. You can take them out. You can, pass them around. And we were in the 6th grade together, and this was I guess in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and he would often have this stuff leaking out of his eye. It would congeal there during class, and he would have to raise his hand. He would raise his hand and say, "Mrs. Flowers, I need to wash my eye. May I go wash my eye?" And she said, "Sure, Frank, you may." And he would say, "Can Danny come?" And she would say, "Sure," because she never went with him. She didn't know if it was a 2-man operation or a 2-boy operation, this eye washing thing. But we'd go to the bathroom. He'd remove his eye, run it under the water. Well, I watched the whole process, just standing behind him, keeping him company, dry it off with one of those brown paper towels that they have in the restrooms, stick it back in, we'd go back to class. And ever since then, I have not been able to write without the big books, the long books. I have stories without glass eyes in them. But now, I wonder, actually, I don't want to force the issue. I don't know how long I can keep it going. I have another thing, another thing that sticks with me, which I haven't really written about yet, but I know that I'm going to, because it's Hernando DeSoto. For some reason, I can't stop thinking about him.
Well, he walked right through here.
Exactly.
Right where we're sitting.
Exactly.
A lot of people in this territory are vaguely, at least, interested in DeSoto. And of course, he walked through everywhere. He's like George Washington. DeSoto and George Washington slept everywhere.
Yeah, discovering everything.
Well, you will.
Yeah, I think I will.
And DeSoto approaches mythological
exactly
as well. I mean, what he did was real, but the way it's discussed approaches the.
What I would like to write, I would like to write a book called Alabama: A History, and not call it a novel or anything, but nothing in it would be true. Everything would be made up.
That wouldn't be so wildly different from other books called Alabama A History.
Exactly.
They could fit right on the shelf with some of them. Your second book, which was, I'm very fond of Ray in Reverse.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ray in Reverse is lots of fun, and I think it's got some very complicated stuff in it. Not just that it's in reverse, but thematically. But it's not gotten the attention that the first one got, and that the third one, Watermelon King, promises to get. A couple of simple little questions. Whatever possessed you to tell the story chronologically backwards?
I wanted a happy ending. That's the only way I was going to get one.
Moving back to
Moving
Ray's
backwards,
innocence.
because he had a hideous life. He ended hideously, but he began well. So if I started it at the beginning and ended, it would have been a dark story. As it is, I think that has a little bit of shine to it, a little brightness.
Okay. The other half of this question is a story that is consciously arranged for kind of optimism, or at least an attempt at getting to from death towards youth, not the pattern we're in.
Right, unfortunately.
Has not been so far as successful, as popular as the other two books are and will be.
Well, I don't, and I
Do you have
think,
any notions about that?
well, I think that Ray in Reverse has the best sentence for sentence writing that I've done. That I would go back to that book were I asked to do this, to pick out this writing sample. That's the book that I would go to. As to why, one reason I think that it hasn't done as well is that a lot of people don't like Ray. He is I've painted I think a realistic picture of a an adulterous guy who's selfish and who as his life moves as he moves toward his death, he only gets worse and worse. But I think that this is a pattern that I see in real life. I think that I painted a real picture. People don't like him. Women don't like him. I've got some really bad reviews from women, and so I think that's part of the reason. The other reason is that people can't really decide whether it's a novel or whether it's short stories. That it's kind of, and I can't really decide either. And if you look at the book, it just says Ray in Reverse. It doesn't say anything about what it is.
A novel.
It doesn't say it,
But it is.
Yeah, I think it qualifies as one. And part of me wants to blame the cover. The cover just never was that great, and I think that can't be the reason. But I need to have some reason other than the fact that it's a bad book, because I don't think it is.
Fitzgerald had lousy covers too, and
he survived.
He did all right. But you have the adult males in your novels are not Father Knows Best. They're all the adult males in your novels are like adult males, adult human beings.
Right.
They're flawed human beings, and the fact I don't find Ray, maybe it just shows you my own low ethical standards,
Right.
which is entirely likely, but I don't find Ray reprehensible. I find Ray a fairly ordinary fellow.
As do I. I was surprised when people objected to him. He's a lot like a lot of the guys that I know. Not unlike me in many ways, but certainly, I mean, we're not the same person.
No, I don't think you are, and this has no bearing on the upcoming question, which is Ray's fairly tortured sexuality, or somewhat ambiguous sexuality.
Yeah.
Ray has little flirtations with homosexuality, does he not?
He does. But I think his whole life is a flirtation with different things. It's an inability to really stick to one thing. He marries in an attempt to escape one thing. He doesn't get married for the woman that he loves. He marries in order to escape this flirtation with homosexuality. He wants to prove to himself that this is not who he is. But yeah, he has a couple. He has one in his I think early 30s and one in his early 20s. So there is there is the sexuality issue that's it's unclear, it's ambiguous.
And the scene where he's rubbing that other man's
That's
feet.
what, yeah.
Was that was one of the standalone short stories that you speak of?
Yes,
That had been a short story?
that was the first story that I published.
Was
ever.
it?
Yeah.
Ah.
It was called Elephant Bait at the time. And what happened over the years a lot is that I wrote about Ray in story form. And I wrote stories that weren't about Ray by name, but clearly were the same character. And over time, all my books seem to come together, not of one piece, but sort of a bringing together of disparate pieces. The Watermelon King is no different. Big Fish was made the same way. Over time, things start to accumulate, and you see patterns. I saw patterns in the work, and they just come together thematically into a book.
Is there no temptation for you to write a screenplay of Ray in Reverse, or a screenplay of The Watermelon King, or screenplays based on stories of your own?
Mm-hmm. There's very little temptation because it's ground that I've already covered. I would like to do new stuff, stuff that's interesting to me. There's one story that I have that I've written that's never been published that possibly I could change drastically and turn into a screenplay, which I'm interested in. It's about a boy whose mother dies, and he begins picking up women in graveyards, and that's how social life is in the graveyard. And I find that, I think that would be a great movie.
Well, I do too.
Whatever you say.
I'm looking
Sure.
forward to that. Love in the Graveyard is an old Southern theme.
Yeah.
Well, this has been delightful, Daniel.
Anytime.
Well,
I'm free next week.
I'm sure that we'll do this again.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next book. I'm looking forward to the movie, and we'll sit down and we'll talk again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.